The following video is about 10 minutes long and is excerpted from a Khan Academy video that attempts to provide last-minute tips for the SAT. We've included it here because it goes over a reading strategy that test takers are supposed to use for reading passages on the SAT. It's important for all test takers to reflect on how they plan to read actively on the SAT. As you watch this video, think about the recommendations that this gentleman makes and think about your own plan to read actively on the test.
So this is a strategy that is highlighted in the tips and strategies section of Khan Academy Official SAT Practice. And it is a version of a famous active reading strategy technique called SQ3R, and I've sort of adapted it for the SAT. The S stands for survey, the Q stands for question, the R's stand for, there are 3 R's. First one is read, second one is recite, third one is review. And so let's see how that works. Okay, so we're gonna do an overview of this, and then we'll move into looking how it works on a passage. So we're first going to survey. When you turn to a new passage in the SAT, turn the page, there it is, bang. What do we do? If we follow this strategy, and there are other strategies, but this one works pretty well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to read the blurb for context. The blurb is a little small print at the top. It's going to tell you a little bit about what you're about to read. It's going to tell you the title. It's going to tell you the year that it was written, and we'll just sort of let that go. But you should skim it because it's going to start bubbling away in the back of your mind. Then skim this is part of the surveying, the scanning and skimming you're going to do. If you just have a quick look at the first sentence of every paragraph, this is going to take you 1 minute. Don't take a lot of time with it because you are going to read the passage, believe it or not. And then I'd like you to consider surveying the questions too. In doing that, you're going to put little marks in them. You're going to read and see what, whether there are questions that mention paragraph 3, whether there are questions that mention specific line numbers. And you're going to put you'll put brackets along the side of your passage. And again, this is just a quick scan and skim. You're not trying to do these questions. You're not trying to remember these questions. You also can circle weird names of big words in the questions because if you have looked at them once, the chances are good that your brain will kind of perk up when you read it, when you're finally reading the passage. And this should take not very long, just a minute or 2. Not as much as 2, probably close to a minute. So the next thing you're going to do is going to do the question stage. And the question stage is just a really quick thing, and it's all just about getting fired up. You're just going to be like, okay, why do I care? Get excited. Maybe I'm not excited about this, but I'm going to make myself excited because that way I'm going to ask questions as I go. What's the point of this passage? These are some questions you could ask yourself. You don't have to answer it. You don't need to take too much time. But the idea is, what is this about? What do I hope to learn in this passage? Then you're going to start reading actively. What does reading actively mean? It means underlining and circling claims, things that the paragraph is saying, this is a problem, and then that may be a claim, and then there'd be examples throughout the paragraph that support that claim. You're going to underline and circle keywords. The idea is just sort of do with your hand, the gestures that you're making with your hand on the page, what you hope your brain is doing in terms of remembering what you're reading. You're reading actively. You should make quick notes. We have 3 different kinds of, there are 4 different really useful quick notes you can make. There's the plus. If the author is supporting some idea, you could put a little plus in the, in the margins. If there's, something's being undermined, something's being criticized heavily, you can put a minus. If the people that are being described are confused, you could put a question mark. If the people who are being mentioned are excited, there's this huge discovery, then you could make a little exclamation point. Those are just ways to engage with what you're reading. Other 2 points I want to make are circling the but and circling the and. The but is basically contrast words, and you could probably thinking of them right now. We have, however, unfortunately, there are tons of them. In the and, nevertheless, even so, in fact is actually a contrast word. Then we have circling the ands, and that's therefores and since and so. Those are all and words. Those are important to circle. The last thing I'll mention is the semicolon. Semicolons are helpful because they usually indicate that the sentence is going to tell you the same thing in a slightly different way. So if you don't understand the first time, maybe the second time will it'll be more straightforward. So a semicolon is also a form of an and. Okay, so that was the reading. That was active reading. And then as you go, I also want you to consider, after every paragraph, saying, what was that about? What was the point? And you make a little note in the margin. You use your own words to describe what you're reading, and that kind of gives you control over what you're reading. So you don't find yourself reading the second paragraph and realizing you have no idea what the first paragraph was about. It happens, especially with, on test day to many people. The more you're able to rephrase it as you go along after every paragraph, and then finally the review part is after completing the passage, the more you'll be set up to answer the questions correctly. Okay, the next big reading strategy I want to talk about is just a follow-on of this active reading, and that is two critical things. Excuse me. One of them is rephrasing, and one of them is predicting. Rephrasing is a way of getting control of a question. A lot of these questions just kind of peter out at the end, and they don't actually have a question mark. This is the reading section. What I want you to avoid at all costs is doing this. Don't read the questions, then the choices, and choose the one that sounds best. We talked about that earlier. It's not the best way to do the SAT or any test. What you should do is to rephrase if possible. We'll see what that means in a second. That's using how, what, or why. Every question can't be rephrased using how, what, or why, but many of them can, and those that can, it's worth doing. Because what it does is it gives you control of the question and gives you a more pointed question to go back to the passage and read around and predict. So you're reading around any line references that are mentioned in the passage, in the question. You're reading around, and then you are going to predict. So rephrasing and predicting are the two things that you should find yourself doing again and again as you go. And the goal is to know what you want before you start looking. Okay? If you know what you want before you start looking, you're not going to wind up looking at the choices one by one and trying to make sense of them. Okay? Because that's just a recipe for losing a lot of time. Spending time giving the benefit of the doubt to questions, to answer choices that aren't right, and you find yourself trying to figure out how they could be right, when you're much better served. You'll save more time if you go and you get your own answer, you trust yourself, and get your own answer, and then cross out the ones that don't match your answer, because your answer is going to be based on evidence that you will find in the passage, because every question, there's only one right answer, and that one right answer is an answer that is backed up by evidence. The others are wrong for whatever reason, but the right answer has evidence. Okay, here's some examples of rephrasing. This is an exercise. I'm gonna have some water. Why don't you guys read these for a second? I whipped these up earlier. The author mentions the craft of cat hair felting. It's a real thing. Primarily in order to... So that question is sort of like, can I go back to the passage and say, the author mentions the craft of you get tongue-tied even thinking about it or talking about it. So if you can rephrase that and say, why is the cat hair felting there? Why? right? In order to is sort of a why. That's something you can keep in your head. Why is the cat hair felting there? And you go and you answer that question in your own words. And then you come across other ones that don't match. Let's look at the next one. The author introduces the second paragraph with the word luckily in order to. I would rephrase this saying, what does luckily do? Why is it there? Why? What does it do? Okay, what is the function or purpose of the word luckily? Okay, go back, you answer it in your own words, cross out the ones that don't match your answer. The description in the third paragraph indicates that what Kermit values most about Miss Piggy is her. Is her what? Okay, so you go back and you say, how do I phrase it? Like, why? What does he value most about her? And you go back and you may discover that it's her strength. There's an example of her strength, or her loyalty, and you'd say like, oh, it's the loyalty, and you go and you cross out the ones that don't, the answer choices that don't include loyalty, because there's evidence that tells you that the third paragraph, loyalty is key. Okay, so in the context of the passage, the author's use of the phrase "jiggy with it" is primarily meant to convey the idea that. Okay, so you say to yourself like, it's not what does jiggy with it mean, it's why does the author use that phrase? And you go back, like, why is it there? Is it because he's trying to be cool? Is it because he really loved Will Smith in the late 90s? We don't know. But you go back, you find evidence. There's clearly some evidence about why the author has decided to use this word. Okay, and then you answer that question. You come back, cross out the answers that don't, the choices that don't match your answer.
With those recommendations in mind, think about how you plan to actively read on the test. Remember that you can write on the test, and also remember that any preliminary strategies you have for assessing the text before you start reading should really take into consideration the short amount of time you have for each passage.